Hello, my name is Julian, and welcome to my channel, where I channel through tarot and otherwise just speak on topics that resonate with my heart and mind, uh, which I'll be doing today. And today I want to talk about the inherent narcissism present in addiction and distinctions that I perceive between that kind of narcissism and more traditional narcissism. Now, I am not qualified to diagnose anybody, nor do I perceive these views and thoughts, feelings, beliefs, etc., as being absolute. These are just, well, it's just something I want to talk about, something I feel and consider. So, that said, my knowledge and understanding comes from my own experiences, and including research I've done and things, but I'm not, accredited psychologist, or, I don't even know if accredited is the right word. I'm not accredited. I have a degree in general education, for whatever that's worth. Okay, so as anyone can see, addiction is something that, on some level, all humans encounter and deal with on some level, but we're not going to talk about it in that broad of a lens today. But I guess a good place to start would be talking about narcissism and what is it. And I think a simple way to put it would be a narcissist is someone that has a pretty total lack of empathy, coupled with a lack of care or consideration for the feelings and experiences of others, to a very detrimental degree, and fueled by self-interest. Of course, there can be some pain, trauma, and things that lead to that paradigm and that kind of value system. But I do feel like for our purposes, that's what I mean when I say a narcissist. Somebody that isn't necessarily unaware of their self-interest, but is solely self-interested, egoically self, not the true self. That's the point, it's like is so far gone into the illusion of separation, and the, innate predominance of the individual ego that, like a Satanist, or even the symbol of the devil and Satan, this notion of separating from God, from source, and using that power to defy the divine unity that exists within, just to please itself and its every last, often hedonistic or whatever whim, which at that point, it's all kind of hedonistic. Now, that's not a word I've read the definition of, I know it contextually. So again, not speaking in absolutes. I'm going to say some silly things. I'm talking to myself, talking to my inner critic. Anyway, so the addict's narcissism, and of course it can overlap. There can be, a full-on narcissist who's also a drug addict, or a porn addict, or whatever, but I think the kind of addict I'm talking about is a very common kind, would essentially be the other part of that very common toxic pairing between the narcissist and the empath. Excuse me. Where the this is not a funny subject. I'm a joker, but I'm not trying to make light of something that a lot of people suffer a lot through. So the addict's form of narcissism, as far as I can tell and as I've experienced, it's like the exact inverse. It kind of comes from a place of profound sensitivity and at times often a real dedication to helping others, to the point of total disregard for their own individual self, and thus leading to the other side of the coin, and now feels like a good time to clarify as well, and all just to make my point and not to say that, not to try to pose some superior moral or ideology or anything like that, that I think I'm not trying to victimize or villainize anybody or put anyone in the victim role or the villain role and to blame one or the other, I'm not trying to say that's wrong, but for the sake of clarity and just trying to be objective, I feel that, it's like the narcissist victimizes others and in turn themselves, but without maybe a care or a clue in the world that is actually happening. It all catches up though, eventually. In this life or the next, baby. But whereas the addict victimizes themselves, with their actions and their self-reflection and their self-image, etc. So they can act very similarly, and they can, their actions and behaviors can inflict a similar kind of damage on a community. I think that in a tribal setting, in my fantasy tribe, I'm always like, man, if I was the leader of a tribe, or one of the leaders, and there were like narcissists that just refused to take responsibility for their mode of action and behavior that is so detrimental to the community, that they would be exiled. That would be the only option that I could see, is like, well, okay, go out and be on your own, completely alone, and do not come back, knowing that that person had an awakening and they were willing to take responsibility and face what they've done. Be no question, like, of course I got love and forgiveness for you, but you got to show up. You've got to do the work. It's like, I'm not trying to define people by their past, God, it doesn't matter. Nobody should be defined by their past if they're willing to take responsibility. And that's not to say that, people shouldn't be held accountable. Obviously they should, and they are on a cosmic level, whether it's through the intervention of other humans or not. And that's something, that's healing for me to think that, people think they're going to get away with it. No one really gets away. Anyway, okay. Bringing it back. These are big ideas. There's a lot. It can, lots of strings, threads could go many, many places. So, whereas the addict and addiction itself in a tribal setting. I mean, for one, if we were operating with, like in strong, cohesive, if that's the right kind of word, you know what I mean, like communities that work together. Well, I don't think, in fact, I know addiction wouldn't be what it is. It's this widespread societal and cultural isolation that plays part in that. You know what I mean? And this whole master-slave dynamic. It's like the narcissist who wants to enslave others and thus like isolate others to a point where they're just a slave to their whim, that the other, is a slave to the narcissist whim. Or, pardon me, I know that word could be kind of triggering. I mean, no disrespect. Of course I don't, but it's a reality. It's a reality, so I'm not sorry. I recognize that there is, thousands of years ultimately of pain and suffering attached to that word, and I thought it was worth acknowledging that I have respect for that, and I'm not trying to use it carelessly. Focus. Whereas the addict isolates themselves through, in that same kind of misguided, it's the inferiority, the inferiority side of the coin, the other side of which is superiority, the other side of the coin. Let me get back to where I was. So I feel like, a narcissist, full-on narcissist, as they say in the medical field, full-on. Like, son, it's full-on. They are unwilling, but not incapable of healing. The addict is often not unwilling, but believes themselves to be incapable of healing. And frankly, this is part of what leads to this part of the other point. I'm going to edit this. Watch me now. Okay. Whereas the modern social framework of recovery and addiction, healing, etc., is frankly not sufficient, and it on a grand scale, it treats only symptoms. And this is what happens when a civilization, a culture is built on the separation of spirit and community. It's not about religion. It's got nothing to do with religion. Religion is part of that, division course, whatever this. It's a destructive force, can be, has been historically. And that's such a general statement, It's not, some of the finest people in the world are and have been religious. There are figures in all areas of life that are impeccable and whatever. So I'm not trying to overgeneralize or speak in absolutes. I'll say that again and again. So please don't hang on to one little part of what I'm saying. If it doesn't resonate, leave it. But if it does, don't get hung up on the one little thing and just try to hear what I'm saying. When it comes down to it, it's just, there's a lot of work, a lot of work to do. It's not funny, but it's intense, and that's how I deal with the pressure, sometimes. So, The addict doesn't believe themselves to be worth taking responsibility for their own well-being. The narcissist places their own sense of importance and superiority above any kind of consideration for anybody else's well-being. And I'll say again that a narcissist who gets everything they want, that is not well-being. I mean, it's sure, you can have a lot of power, you can do these things, you will never be free, ever, with that mindset. It is a prison. It might be a prison that feels really good to the body, but it destroys the soul. And it's just, you'll never be free. And there is a comfort to be taken in that when it looks like, there's so many narcissists in the world that are just getting everything they want while everybody else suffers, and that is a truth. And there are more immediate things that need to be addressed and steps that need to be taken, and, we need to take responsibility and power back into our own hands in order for anything to change, because that's the only way, because the system is not going to do it for us, period. It's just not. People can work through the system, and there's an integration process, and I'm not trying to completely be anti-establishment. It is what it is, and I think all we can do is integrate at this point, but it's just like we cannot abdicate our power any longer. We have to take it into our own hands. I say that as someone who's well aware of the ways in which I still abdicate in small ways. So I'm trying to be a perfectionist. I'm trying to do my best and act from my heart. I derailed this talk. It's bound to happen. More coffee should help. Okay. So I don't know, I suppose that part of what I was saying was that we have to change the cultural, or maybe that's not the right word, but this societal framework, this lens of addiction healing. We need to integrate, every community, every person should have access to a shaman or shamans, period. It's an innate part of nature. And so many of our shamans are locked away, or addicted to drugs, or, are just locked away in their minds on a million different medications, having spent a lifetime being told there's something wrong with them by people who just don't understand and or don't care, and that it's like these symptoms are addressed and treated like a curse, and, every blessing comes with a curse, and vice versa. But it's like that. What scares people is rejected by them. I mean, that which a person does not understand is rejected by default in the world as we know it today. And so I guess, since I went here, I suppose that's part of why I'm talking to you. I see many things, and I always have, and I just want to raise awareness, even in my own little tiny way. And if I can inspire some hope, not to sound cheesy, it's just that I've been through hell many times, and I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. There's no such thing. You know, every mystery leads to another mystery, but I know a place in myself that allows me to be free regardless of what's happening around. My body can still feel pain. You know, I can still experience the sensations of fear. I, run into challenges all the time, but from a view far enough back, I don't know. Prisons start to break away, mental prisons, and you realize you're not going to do anything to change the state of the world by yelling at each other and trying to force your opinion on the world, but by living it, being your notion of righteousness, and not trying to convince other people that you're right, but just living it. And when you truly live it impeccably and you're not trying to get other people to agree with you or believe what you have to say, when you actually are striving for freedom for yourself and actually taking the steps that you can take as an individual toward that, instead of abdicating that responsibility and then complaining about how it's not your fault, which is not everybody, okay? I'm talking to my own past self, to be clear. And plenty of other people who are still doing that, to also be clear about that. But nothing against them. There's a lot. There's a lot here. I said it was going to be about narcissism, and it is, because I think that at the core, we are dealing with that exact thing. The ones who want all the power, and the ones who don't think they're worth any power to such an extent that they deny their own innate power, and then, master slave. Like, it's just called, whatever, boss, employee. And I'm not, not saying that everybody quit your jobs. It's like, follow your heart. We got ourselves into this mess, and we can get ourselves out. Maybe not all at once. Okay. I think I said enough. I love you, and good night.